So, Good Omens 2 dropped at the end of July, and it has caused some reactions among fans. Honestly, it's kind of hard to know where to start here. Rarely have I been a part of something that shook a fandom so completely. Okay, let's start with some surface level stuff. Aziraphale's hair is even fluffier in this season. It looks so soft. Beelzebub has a new face. Literally. I do like that they addressed the casting change in the story. That was fun. Not crazy about the new makeup, though. Season 1 Beelzebub was allowed to be hideous, with the face pustules and the flies always buzzing around. Like, yeah, they did make her teeth more disgusting, but the pustules have been replaced by what looks like running mascara lines, which is kind of funny, considering what's coming. I like the jaunty little fly hat, though. That's cute. I'm also not crazy about Crowley's new hair color. It's a very cartoonish shade of red. Like, yeah, the shade of red is 666, like, haha, that's a cute Easter egg. And it did grow on me by episode 6, but I don't know, I still prefer the season 1 shade. I really like the new contacts, though. I don't know what's different about them, but I didn't find them nearly as hard to look at. I guess you could say they're easier on the eyes. I'm sorry. We got confirmation that the Bentley does have some degree of sentience, which is adorable. I love how attached it is to Aziraphale. It's also hinted that the bookshop may have some sentience as well. Was not expecting to see Crowley pre-fall, but Angel Crowley is precious. I love how fan depictions of Crowley before the fall tend to have him looking like he did in Eden, with the long crimson tresses, all mysterious and alluring. And then we meet Crowley as an angel, and he's just the embodiment of Squee. He's such a dork, and I love it. The new characters we got are a lot of fun. Muriel is wonderful, absolutely love them. It's interesting that Muriel seems to love Earth instantly, when so many angels are just coldly dismissive of it. I like how they have to hold themselves back from saying something nice about Aziraphale. And I love Seroquel, too. There was a lot of great representation in this season, and some really subtle representation at that. One of the angels in Gabriel's posse has one arm. Lindsay is never referred to by any kind of gendered pronouns. And Crowley's Edinburgh outfit is modeled more after women's fashion of the time than men's. The depiction of the angels in Season 2 was interesting, to say the least. They felt a lot softer, where in the first season there was an air of menace about them, like they were actual forces to be reckoned with. In Season 2, they're mostly friendly or comic relief. Also, I'm probably looking way too much into this, but I thought it was interesting that Aziraphale's tartan pattern shows up more across Season 2, usually worn by the more likable angels. Neil Gaiman has said that trends come and go in heaven, but I do think it's interesting who we see wear it and at what times. Seroquel and Muriel, who we have no negative connotations with so far, both wear it, while Michael and Uriel don't. And Gabriel only wears it when he's still missing his memories. I really was not a fan of Nina and Maggie's story. I wanted to be. I was so looking forward to it. The idea of Crowley and Aziraphale, who have circled each other for 6,000 years and not been honest with each other about their feelings, giving relationship advice was just rife with comedic potential. And the story has its moments, sure, but mostly it felt oddly out of place. Almost like the story was warring between the Gabriel mystery and the Nina-Maggie plot, and both were just stealing screen time away from each other. I cannot for the life of me figure out why Aziraphale wouldn't follow up on the bartender's comment that there was a mason right next door. When you're investigating, you follow where the clues lead, right? Why would you drive all the way to Edinburgh and not follow up on this very obvious lead? No, clearly we have to head back to Soho and futz around with the Shop Owners Association. Not to mention that Nina and Maggie's relationship is awkward, and not in a fun way. It's kind of hard to suss out at the beginning how well they know each other. Maggie obviously has a crush, and she's delighted that Nina remembers her coffee order, but Nina confirms it's just because Maggie's a regular. And then Maggie introduces herself, like, what, they've never introduced themselves before now? And Nina's really dismissive of Maggie, referring to her by her coffee order, openly mocking her record shop. And it super doesn't help that Nina is already in a relationship. And we have to make it crystal clear that Lindsay is just a horrible partner right from the get-go, so we don't feel guilty about rooting for her and Maggie. Why have Nina in an unhealthy relationship at all, unless to draw a parallel between Crowley and Aziraphale's abusive former offices? And listen, look, I love a good narrative parallel, but some of the similarities between Nina and Maggie and Crowley and Aziraphale feel oddly shoehorned in, right down to some of their interactions.
You're not helping, Angel.
Both their introductions feature one character trying to make a connection and the other one being dismissive and getting right back to their work. Why go out of your way to make another old-fashioned sunshine character hopelessly in love with a bitter cynic? We already have Crowley and Aziraphale do something else. Not to say I hated everything about their story. Aziraphale's interactions with Maggie are wonderful. He's such a sweetheart. And I love Crowley's exchange with Nina. My favorite exchange between Crowley and Aziraphale this season was the one in the pub. There's so much going on here, highlighting how they're still talking around each other and misunderstanding what the other's saying, and unintentionally revealing their love languages. And I love the scene where Crowley's trying to play matchmaker for Nina and Maggie. Look at his face! This is an honest-to-goodness smile. Not his signature smirk, not one of his smug grins. That is a genuine smile. It's such a frank display of emotion from a character who is normally so guarded, and it's wonderful to see. Crowley loves Earth, and he loves humanity. And oh man, is it nice to see him letting his guard down and allowing himself to be happy here. Actually, speaking of letting his guard down, it's notable how often we see him without his sunglasses this season, especially in the bookshop. This season makes a point of showing Crowley removing his glasses every time he enters the bookshop, cementing how open he is around Aziraphale and how comfortable he's become with his new life. This will become devastating later. Why does Crowley look so gobsmacked when Nina assumes he and Aziraphale are a couple? There's no way he's just now realizing what he feels about Aziraphale. Just because they haven't kissed yet can't mean that Crowley is ignorant of his own feelings. Okay, so as I was writing this, I came across a Tumblr post that pointed out that what Crowley was probably upset about was realizing that he and Aziraphale appear to be a couple, even to someone who barely knew them, and how dangerous that could be. Because the next scene shows him going off to sulk at the restaurant, and he's talking about how worried he is about Gabriel's amnesia and Gabriel smiting him. I like that interpretation much better, so that's what I'm going to stick with. I also love the scene following this where Crowley confronts Gabriel. Tennant was on fire in this scene. It just felt so cathartic to watch Crowley rip into Gabriel. And I like that Crowley stops Gabriel when it becomes clear he really was going to jump out the window. It shows just how far Crowley is willing to go and brings it back around to the fact that Crowley does not revel in causing misery or hurting others. I like the idea that Crowley would have to face some long-buried good in Gabriel and come to terms with the fact that someone he hates might not be as bad as he believes. And on the flip side, I really liked Aziraphale's reaction to Gabriel as well. He offers to protect Gabriel and tries to help him, but it's clear he doesn't trust Gabriel and definitely wasn't happy to see him. I like how he stops himself from reflexively saying he also loves Gabriel, like there's some angelic pull to admit that he loves everything in creation, but he can't bring himself to say it about Gabriel. And later he outright tells Gabriel to his face that he used to be awful. This felt like a huge admission for Aziraphale, to give voice to the fact that heaven might not be perfect and his fellow angels aren't necessarily all good. It shows how much he's grown, but that he's still willing to believe in others and give them a chance. I have mixed feelings about the inclusion of the Job story in Good Omens canon. It's clumsy at times, but ultimately there are a handful of incredibly poignant moments. The hardest part for me was, again, the portrayal of heaven as this cold, uncaring entity, of the angels as unsympathetic assholes. I do like the moment where Gabriel insists to Aziraphale that they aren't doing anything wrong, that they are the good guys, so everything they do is inherently justified. There are far too many examples of Christian organizations using their own name to justify their actions, that because they speak in the name of God, what they're saying or doing couldn't possibly be wrong. Like I said in the last one, I was blessed to grow up in a very healthy religious environment, but I have spent some time in a very toxic one, and it was awful. I completely understand how an experience like that can turn someone off from organized religion entirely. And I can appreciate all the more the need to question any religious authority that leans on its own righteousness. And this episode does have a few of my favorite moments from this season. They're quiet, understated scenes that hit so hard. The first was when Crowley visits Job in the middle of his destroyed home. It feels like Crowley is projecting his own sense of loss and betrayal onto Job, and trying to bait Job into cursing God for his misfortune. But then Job answers that his anger is directed at himself, And when Crowley, stunned, asks what Job has done, Job replies that he doesn't know, but that he must be so far sunken into sin that he doesn't even know what he did to deserve this. For someone like Crowley, for whom asking questions is so important, this feels like an answer that really shakes him. The second is where God talks directly to Job. After spending the night drinking and bickering, Crowley and Aziraphale truly feel on equal ground in this moment. They're both in awe of what they're seeing. Aziraphale, that God is openly and directly communicating with Job, and Crowley, that Job is being allowed to ask questions, even if those questions aren't getting direct answers. The fact that neither of them can hear God in this moment feels highly significant, as if God is saying, you two don't get to understand, not yet. And then the way Job stumbles, shell-shocked, back into his home is fantastic acting from Peter Davison, giving the scene a real weight and gravitas. But my favorite scene in this episode was the one on the cliff between Crowley and Aziraphale. It feels like such an important shift in their relationship. Aziraphale is beginning to see Crowley in a different light, and the acting is incredible. I love the way Aziraphale was prepared to accept his fate with such dignity. Michael Sheen brought this character's turmoil to life beautifully. And this episode did have its fair share of levity. I love how popular Bildad the Shuhite has become. David Tennant's deliveries were spot on. And when Crowley and Aziraphale team up to save Job's children, they're smart about it. I like that they're both clever enough to play to Gabriel's ego. I just don't like the implication that Crowley and Aziraphale are having to game an unfair system. It's great that Aziraphale is thinking for himself. That's the whole point of free will. It's just kind of awkward. Having these characters present for biblical events and offering their commentary is one thing. It's a little weird to get them involved. But my least favorite part of this episode is Crowley tempting Aziraphale into eating the ox ribs. Why is Aziraphale eating for the first time framed as this terrible thing? He starts stuffing his face and the music swells ominously while lightning crashes in the distance, and I thought Aziraphale's love of food was a good thing? I thought it was a sign of his appreciation of humanity and God's creation. Food is meant to be enjoyed. Why frame it as the first step in him falling to temptation? Also, I just always liked the idea of Aziraphale discovering food on his own and being the one to share that love with Crowley. It's such an integral part of Aziraphale's character. I like to think of it as something he discovered for himself, and it would be a great flipping of their roles. I do like the idea that they've been getting drunk and shooting the shit for literal centuries, but maybe we don't have to recontextualize everything? On the flip side, I loved the Edinburgh mini-episode. There's not much I can say about it. This was season 2 at its best. The shenanigans were on point. Crowley high on laudanum was the funniest bit this season. I love the way this episode explores morality, confronting naive idealization with harsh reality. It just felt like back to basics with these characters when they're debating morality and the human condition. It was so great to see. And I love the little moment where Aziraphale realizes what this doctor is trying to accomplish, when he's holding the jar containing the tumor removed from a young boy, and when he hears the child didn't make it, he just kind of curls himself around the jar. Aziraphale's a protector first and foremost, and it's great to get those reminders of that in season 2. Maybe this is a hot take, but I really did not enjoy episode 4. A lot of the comedy just fell flat for me. It's because we all know that if a joke worked one time, then doing it again, and bigger, is guaranteed to be even funnier. It felt like a filler episode, one where we neither advanced the story nor learn anything all that significant about the characters. And the writing felt blunt in a way the series usually isn't. It's not subtle. Like, did you know Aziraphale trusts Crowley unconditionally? Did you know that? It's just odd that a lot of things introduced in this episode didn't really go anywhere. I'm sure Furfur and the Miracle Blocker and maybe even the photograph will become significant in season 3. But for now, this just stands as an awkward interruption to a story that didn't have a lot of time to play out in the first place. 6 one-hour episodes is not a lot to work with, and all I could think about during this episode is, why are we here? Why does this matter? I don't care about some random demon, and I really don't care about the frickin' Nazis. Yeah, I hated the reveal that the Nazis were alive under the rubble of that church and listening to Crowley and Aziraphale's conversation. I was already nervous when we saw Crowley and Aziraphale in their 1941 outfits in the trailer, but I thought, alright, if they go back to the bookshop and get sloshed, that's not so bad. But no, we get a whole extended story about that night. In storytelling, what you don't show is often just as important as what you do show. When you start adding moments into canon, you run the risk of stepping on the previous material in tone or in meaning. Sometimes filling in the blanks in a story only waters down everything around it. Compare this minisode to the Edinburgh minisode. Chronologically, the adventure in Edinburgh happens right before their meeting in London in 1862, in which Crowley asks Aziraphale for holy water. Aziraphale protests, refusing to hand Crowley what he believes would be a suicide pill. Crowley insists that's not what he would use it for, but Aziraphale clearly doesn't believe him, and the two have a falling out. It's already a sad moment, rife with tension. And then in season 2, we learn that in their last meeting, Crowley did something that could be considered unambiguously good. Hell learned about it and dragged him down for something. We don't know what happened to him, but we don't need to. The point is, the last time we saw Crowley, he was being dragged down to hell, undoubtedly for more than a slap on the wrist, and now he's carrying a cane and asking for insurance. The addition of the Edinburgh storyline doesn't change this moment, it enhances it. By contrast, the addition of the bullet catch from 1941 makes it seem like Crowley didn't want Aziraphale to do his magic act, not because it was embarrassing, but because it brought back bad memories of the last time he was present for Aziraphale's act, where he was forced to shoot at Aziraphale. It changes what was a lighthearted bit of improvisation and gives it an angsty undercurrent. And that's to say nothing of how one of the most quiet, gentle, and romantic moments between the Ineffables was turned into something ominous and foreboding. I hate that this romantic scene was overlaid with a different, darker track from the score. Couldn't we have cut from Crowley and Aziraphale in the church to the Nazis in hell, revealing after the fact that they'd overheard Crowley and Aziraphale? Maybe I'm in the minority here and no one else was really bothered by this, but maybe we don't need to recontextualize everything? Okay, now let's get to the big thing. The thing that's getting closer every day. As soon as the amnesiac angel of season 2 was revealed, I was hoping for a Gabriel redemption arc, mostly because John Hamm is so damn entertaining as this character. And amnesiac Gabriel is a ton of fun. I like how he's friendly and gracious, but still retains that air of arrogant condescension that is so quintessentially Gabriel. It's a testament to John Hamm's acting that he was able to make Jim Brill feel like a different person, but the same character. The best part of Gabriel this season was watching the character gain some awareness of himself, the world around him, and other people. He seemed so grateful for everything Mr. Fell was doing for him. I really wanted him to get his memories back and realize what a complete ass he'd been to Aziraphale. I wanted him to be overcome with guilt, or at the very least, willing to acknowledge that he'd behaved badly and vow to try and do better. I wanted some character growth. The moment where he offers himself up to Shax's army feels especially significant. Season 1 Gabriel would never have been this altruistic. But here he seems genuinely concerned about the people in the bookshop, identifies himself as the reason they're all in danger, and promptly offers himself up in surrender. That's a heroic action, dare I say, an angelic display. But ultimately, Gabriel's character development is just left dangling in the wind. The most interesting thing about Gabriel's behavior in Season 2 was how it mirrored both Aziraphale and Crowley in ways that are essential to their characters and set them apart from their peers. He's learning to appreciate what Earth has to offer, like Aziraphale, and he's learning to ask questions, like Crowley. That's super interesting. I wonder where they're gonna go with it. Nowhere. F***ing nowhere. He just fucks off into the ether with Beelzebub. And he's all happy to see Aziraphale again when he gets his memories back, like his voice goes all soft with recognition, and no, fuck you. You treated him like shit. You do not get to act like he's your old buddy. I was never a fan of ineffable bureaucracy. I didn't hate it, it just didn't interest me. If you thought Newt and Anathema's relationship was rushed, well, it is, but so is this. That moment of begrudging camaraderie at the airbase felt like a great place to leave their relationship. Because the next time they meet, they discuss the benefits of not having the apocalypse, and they both almost immediately agree that they're just fine with the status quo. Gabriel was one of the most gung-ho about winning the war. I legitimately don't understand why he would have changed his tune so quickly. What do we really learn about Gabriel and Beelzebub in these moments, besides the fact that they both seem not entirely satisfied with their respective lots in life? We already have Crowley and Aziraphale. Do something else. It was around this point that I started looking at the remaining runtime and getting extremely nervous, because it felt like nothing had really been resolved and we didn't have a lot of time left to do it. Then the Metatron shows up and he's acting all nice and getting Aziraphale coffee, and okay, maybe the big reveal is that the Metatron is just like this kindly, wise old grandpa figure. I could get behind. Oh no, what was that look for? The end of episode 6 is such a wild ride, it's come to be referred to as the final 15 online. And boy oh boy, does a lot happen in just 15 short minutes. Before season 2 came out, I did see a lot of people say they hoped Crowley and Aziraphale would kiss in this season, so the romance between them would be officially, undeniably canon. I understand feeling like the romance wouldn't be canon without an on-screen display of physical affection, but I honestly didn't think it was necessary. Really, I was hoping they wouldn't kiss. Gaiman, Sheen, and Tennant have all said that what Crowley and Aziraphale have is a love story, and the acting alone conveyed that beautifully. Two characters who look at each other like this are not strictly platonic. Crowley and Aziraphale are genderless, sexless beings that are older than time itself. If any relationship lends itself to an Arrow Ace interpretation, it's this one. There's a TikTok that puts it into words better than I could, so I'll link that in the description. There's a lot happening in these final 15 minutes, and a lot of it is off-screen or subtext. This feels like a good a time as any to talk about how we don't hear God's voice narrating this season, ever. We don't hear God at all outside the scene where she's talking to Jove. That feels like a very deliberate choice. I saw someone on Tumblr refer to God as the ultimate reliable narrator. In this story, you can count on whatever God says to be true. And the fact that we don't see the conversation between Aziraphale and the Metatron, but rather hear about it later via Aziraphale's retelling, is highly significant. If God is a reliable narrator, Aziraphale is very clearly not one. Watch Michael Sheen's acting choices. What we do see of Aziraphale's reactions in the flashback, he does not look happy. He looks conflicted and upset. What exactly did the Metatron say to him? Just the fact that he brought up Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship feels like a very, very thinly veiled warning. When Aziraphale returns to the bookshop, he's anxious and jittery and talking over Crowley. This is not the behavior of someone who has good news they're excited to share. But Crowley's barely listening. He's finally worked up the courage to try and lay his feelings out for Aziraphale and be clear about what he wants out of their relationship. And nowhere in there is a desire to be reinstated as an angel. David Tennant's acting is amazing. There's a reason the sad doctor meme is so ubiquitous. Tennant makes you feel what his characters are feeling with his performance. And the journey Michael Sheen takes you on with his face in these scenes is astounding. Sheen has an insane amount of control over his expressions. There is not a muscle in that man's face that moves without his command. And yet, as great as the acting is, I couldn't help but keep looking at that rapidly dwindling runtime and worry about where the hell they're going with this. Crowley and Aziraphale are awkward around each other throughout Season 2. It's something I thought odd at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. After the apocalypse, Crowley and Aziraphale are free from their respective sides. They're in uncharted territory. It would make sense for them to start to feel out their newfound freedom and try to progress their relationship. Aziraphale passive-aggressively refers to the Bentley as their car. Crowley takes off his shades every time he enters the bookshop. They've been circling each other for millennia, and now, with the weight of expectation off their shoulders, they're slowly moving towards a better understanding of each other and what they want. Which makes it that much more heartbreaking that it falls apart so quickly. All it took was one conversation, one offer, one threat, for all that slow progress these two have made to unravel. As the conversation got heated, I began to worry that we weren't going to get a satisfying ending to this season. And then, no, I can see where this is going and I really don't like it. Please don't. It's so cliche. No! I know that you two have been friends for 6,000 years and you both very clearly are in love with each other, but you still need to ask permission. And this is where the metaphor gets a little bit mangled. Yeah, Crowley and Aziraphale are immortal beings that are beyond the scope of space and time and, the realm of human understanding, but they have come to represent Earth and the human race in particular in the narrative, and you can't just kiss someone and lean on the excuse that, oh, I knew he would like it, or I know he's in love with me, and like, no, that's not how that works. And I'm not saying that Crowley is problematic or a bad character. I just think that on the surface, I forgive you is a perfectly reasonable response to having a kiss forced on you. And this is not to say that Aziraphale is blameless in this situation. He is condescending and dismissive throughout the conversation. He calls Crowley, "You're the bad guy," like lumping them in with the rest of hell, when throughout the story he's been insisting that there is good in Crowley. The worst part for me is when he says, "I'll run it, you'll be my second in command," because it just feels like such a punch to the gut to say that, he doesn't want them to be equal partners, that he still wants their relationship to have with him as the moral high ground and Crowley being lesser than. And it's clear after multiple rewatches, everyone has pointed this out by now, Aziraphale is clearly acting out of fear. It's why he's so nervous and jittery, why he keeps looking out the window to see if Metatron is listening to them. It feels like he really is trying to communicate that they're in danger and he's asking for help. But some of the wording he uses feels unnecessarily cruel. These idiots just need to talk to each other, and it's frustrating when it feels like we were inching towards actual communication throughout this season, just to take a giant step backwards right at the end. Like, all I could think of during this scene was how quickly everything was unraveling. And it doesn't help that right when I was starting to feel normal about this again, Rob Wilkins, one of the executive producers, posted about how the look on Aziraphale's face meant that he really wanted to ask Crowley to kiss him again. Like, they give us no peace. And then we just get this buck wild exchange.
Listen. Hear that?
Ooh, I think I know this one. There's a clock ticking in the background, which symbolizes the unstoppable march of time and our own mortality. Actually, not a bad symbol, considering the desperation of their argument, and how they both feel like they're about to lose the other, how they both clearly want to spend eternity together, but now they're rapidly running out of time. That's actually not bad as a narrative device.
No nightingales.
Really? I thought the nightingale was supposed to represent new beginnings, a shift in reality. It was a promise that this new future could be whatever the characters wanted it to be. In that sense, it does make sense for Crowley to invoke it here, but it just takes me right out of the moment. None of the characters acknowledge the nightingale at the end of Season 1. God is the only one who calls attention to it. And that's the point. God sees the big picture. God has details and context that none of the characters have. God even confirms that nobody heard it because they're all busy living their new lives. The nightingale was this great, quiet little symbol that sat right on the edge of the narrative. It wasn't tied specifically to Crowley and Aziraphale's relationship, and there's no mention of nightingales throughout Season 2, so hearing it brought up at this point is really jarring. It doesn't feel like it has anything to do with the argument they just had. It just feels like it's pissing on one of the best moments from Season 1 just to twist the knife in deeper. Maybe it's just me, but maybe we don't need to recontextualize everything? And it makes it that much harder to see Gabriel and Beelzebub get their happy ending in the very same episode, and so easily at that. It's just salt in the wound that Crowley and Aziraphale have had to fight for every scrap of happiness they've ever shared, and then Gabriel and Beelzebub just go off together with no issue. It feels kind of, not malicious, but there's a kind of taunting nature about this season, isn't there? Between ineffable bureaucracy becoming canon and the few quiet, gentle, and romantic moments we did get, it's like, oh, you want this? This is what you want? Too bad, suckers. The kiss was honestly hard to watch, especially when I was hoping they wouldn't kiss at all. So not only did they kiss, but they kissed in the worst possible way. I've seen a lot of arguments that, well, that's the point. The kiss was supposed to be awful. Like, yeah, I get that the kiss was supposed to be awful. If the choir howling in agony over top of it wasn't enough of an indication. That doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. Actually, there was something awkward about this whole confrontation. Sheen and Tennant are acting their hearts out, but the dialogue doesn't always feel entirely natural. I know these two suck at communicating, and Aziraphale essentially has a celestial gun to his head, but it seems like some of the dialogue is built around ensuring misunderstandings.
You can't leave this book. Nothing lasts forever.
It all escalates so quickly, it's hard not to see the writing choices behind it. Not that I expected the characters to suddenly be great with their words, but it did at least seem throughout the season that they were trying to understand each other better. I usually enjoy angst and melodrama, but I guess I found my limit, or maybe I'm just tired. But this scene wasn't angst-ridden in a satisfying way, it just hurt. I've been angry at media before, I've been disappointed with media before. But this is the first time I felt betrayed by a piece of media. And I only just watched season 1 last year. I can't imagine what this must feel like for fans who've been waiting for this since 2019, let alone 1990. And this is not to say that fictional relationships need to be 100% healthy all the time. Of course they don't. No real-life relationship is 100% healthy all the time. And the best-written characters are going to make mistakes. But how far can things go to shit before they can reasonably be expected to get better? How many times can they hurt each other before it starts to feel like, yeah, maybe they're not good for each other after all? This was just such a step backward after so little progress. Maybe it wouldn't have been as exciting, but I would much rather have watched Aziraphale and Crowley awkwardly fumbling towards better communication, getting it wrong but earnestly trying, and tentatively exploring the new freedom they've fought so hard for. I'm also not thrilled that the foundation of the next season is going to be the Second Coming. Good Omens is a subversive piece of media. It intentionally asks uncomfortable questions. But there's a point where the metaphor seems to lose its track. It's clear that heaven in this story is a stand-in for corrupt religious organizations, megachurches, and radical evangelicals who tout their own goodness while being cold, uncaring, and downright hostile to the people they should be protecting. But at some point, it is literally just saying heaven is terrible. The corruption has to end at some point, right? Like, there has to be someone good in heaven besides God. Is this where Jesus comes in?
Don't do this, not with Jesus.
I really do not want Jesus to become a major character in the Good Omens canon. The crucifixion scene was a difficult watch, but it was meant to be uncomfortable, and it was ultimately respectfully solemn, with the only real levity coming from Crowley and Aziraphale's commentary on the hateful way Jesus' message can and has been twisted. I feel like Jesus does not need to be involved in this story any further. Putting aside my own feelings, we've done this before. The world is ending and only Crowley and Aziraphale can stop it, but they're not talking. What's going to separate the Second Coming from Armageddon, aside from the fact that Crowley and Aziraphale are estranged at the start of the story and are going to have to find their way back to each other? Again. I understand that this isn't the end. I understand Season 2 is the bridge between the story as it existed already and Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's plans for a sequel. But media doesn't exist in a vacuum, and the fact that this season was released in the current climate of franchise rot doesn't reflect well on it. We didn't need a Season 2. We need a Season 3, because the story can't possibly have a satisfying ending here. And sometimes it is just the nature of a story continuing that makes it messy. Every story is going to have some degree of contrivance just to be possible. Why didn't Mother Gothel just take Rapunzel and leave the kingdom? Because then we wouldn't have a story. That's where suspension of disbelief comes into play. But the more time you spend in a fictional world, you run the risk of having to justify certain aspects of a story that an audience may have been willing to accept with a shorter runtime. If Crowley was such a good person, why did he fall in the first place? Well, because then there wouldn't be a story, would there? Two angels team up to stop the apocalypse doesn't have the same ring to it as an angel and a demon team up to stop the apocalypse. In a lot of ways, Season 1 was lightning in a bottle. And unfortunately, a lot of Season 2 felt like Season 1, but less. There's been a lot of discussion surrounding Season 2. A lot of meta posts, a lot of theorizing, it's great. But I want to highlight one my friend shared with me called The Magic Trick You Didn't See, being an analysis of Good Omens Season 2. It's a long read, but it's worth it. This essay, more than anything, has helped put my mind at ease regarding the direction of the story. A key point in the essay is that a big theme in Season 2 is deception. Sleight of hand, misdirection, things not being what they seem. The author points out that each episode begins with a shot of something from the episode, projected via old-timey film strip, before the film strip dissolves away, lost to corrosion. Memory is another big theme throughout this season, specifically lost memories. It's significant to note which characters mention having lost their memories, what characters do remember, and when they call attention to those memories. There is definitely more to the story than meets the eye, and that's interesting. But again, maybe I'm just tired, but it seems like an odd choice for the mid-section of a story. Why present a story and then say this isn't actually the right story? Why let us sit with things as they are for however long it takes for the final chapter to come out, only to say, no, actually, that's not what happened. Here's how it happened. A reveal that alters the reality of a work can be very effective in a contained story like a book or a film or a single episode of television, but for the second season in a 3-season show, when we don't know when the next installment is coming, it feels like an odd choice. It's a very frustrating place to leave the audience. And full disclosure, I was in a terrible place mentally when I watched the final episode. I'd had an awful week, and the season finale was not the comfort I was hoping to get. And yes, that absolutely did color my initial viewing. But enough time has passed since it came out that hopefully I can view it in a more objective light. I have come around to a lot of the choices made this season. But it doesn't change the fact that watching this season wasn't a satisfying experience. I can't judge Season 3 until I see it, and I don't want the production of Season 3 to be rushed just so we can see how it ends. I hope the cast and crew is given all the time they need to make it great. I hope Gaiman can fulfill the vision he and Pratchett had for the story's conclusion, and end up with something he can be proud of. All I can say is the writing for Season 3 better be tight as a drum. And I hate saying that! This isn't the feeling I want to have about Season 3. Honestly, my biggest fear for Season 3 would be that we don't get a satisfying reconciliation between Aziraphale and Crowley. I worry that there will be so much ground to cover plot-wise that them reuniting will end up being just as rushed as the final 15. I hope that's not the case. I hope their happy ending isn't just a footnote. Gaiman is a good writer. I know there is a plan for this story. And maybe this was all part of it. It probably was. Neil Gaiman's not the kind of writer who accidentally makes you feel things. I'm sure we were all supposed to feel hurt and betrayed and frustrated and angry and heartbroken. And if that's the case, congratulations? Media is not there to be pleasant and digestible all the time. Good Omens has always been a challenging series. And at the end of the day, it is just a show. I really should just relax. But I'm not so much excited for Season 3 as I am desperate for it. And that's just not a great feeling to have about a piece of fiction. Let me know what you thought about Season 2 and what you're hoping for from Season 3. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'm eternally optimistic, and I'll catch you guys next time. The depiction of the angels is these... bleh. And I miss Euro's gold flake. I just don't... Oh, hi. Hello. This was Season 3, it is... bleh. This was Season 3, it is... This... Oh, Season 2. Oh, fuck. I wasn't recording. Let's try this again, shall we? And I'm not saying this makes Crowley... And I'm not saying this makes Crowley...